Hi, I'm Father Mitch Packel, and I'm standing in front of the Pontifical Biblical Institute and its Jerusalem branch. The Pontifical Biblical Institute is the Pope's official Bible school, part of the Gregorian University, and it's run by my Jesuit brothers, including this branch here in Jerusalem. Inside, they have a small museum of artifacts discovered by various Jesuit archaeologists and Bible scholars over the years. I'd like to go inside the museum to see some of the artifacts so as to learn a little bit about the ancient cultures here and to learn something about the methods of archaeology. One of the best ways to set dates for different levels of an archaeological dig is through what's known as pottery typology. You take a look at pottery, at the way that it developed over time, and you can see how different stages of history are made known in pottery. And one of the great things about pottery is it doesn't decay, it doesn't fall apart. So we can have this as a reliable element in these different digs that the archaeologists do. So first of all, we can see here very simple oil lamps. What they did is they made a bowl and then gave a slight pinch to the bowl to put the wick. And they'd fill the bowl with oil and put a wick at the little end and let it burn. These top oil lamps belong to what's known as the Middle Bronze Age. This was the time of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and his sons. And these are found from that period of history. One even has 4 points to it because they wanted more light. Well, later on in the Iron Age, which is the time, especially after David, Iron Age started at the time of Joshua and moved on into the time of David and the kings of Israel and Judah. You can see that the pinch becomes much more profound. And so it's more tight and the wick will stay better in place. Also, sometimes they have a little bit more of a base than the earlier ones do. Then we move to another period, the period of the Maccabees. This is the Hellenistic period, the time after Alexander the Great and the time of the Maccabees. You can see that now the oil lamp is much smaller and it's really pinched tightly. Then from there we can also see that they begin to make the lamps with a hole in the center for pouring oil and an end for sticking a wick in. And as time goes on into the Roman period, it becomes even more so with a little bit of decoration at the spout where the wick would go and the oil. These would be from the time of Christ. And then you go down and you start to see oil lamps from the Byzantine times, especially down over here. They become more focused to a point. And some of these are Byzantine, well, they'll have Christian decorations on them and be much more specialized. From the shapes of these oil lamps, archaeologists find inside the mounds where people used to live, they can tell the date of the era. And this is a very, very useful tool for us in archaeology. This is ancient Egyptian pottery, pre-dynastic. Dynastic always refers to the time when there were pharaohs in Egypt. These are from before there were pharaohs, long before in some cases. Some of these are not burnished, that is, they don't have a very shiny top to them or finish. So these two in particular would belong to the Badarian period. That was before they learned how to put a gloss on it. But they were making pottery, and that would be about 4000 BC. Then we also see the Amratian pottery. This here has a burnish. What they would do is stick the pottery upside down with the lip of the bowl in ashes, and they would bake it upside down so that The part that was in the ash would be very black and shiny, and then the other part would be reddish brown. And they even learned how to make some shapes by incising into the burnish. So in this case, it looks like a boat. The mast in the middle. Then we see finally Gurzian period. This would be from the time of about 3600 to 3200 BC, still before there were pharaohs in Egypt. This is not only burnished, but you can see how they made lots and lots of shapes and incised it into the pottery. Well, there is still one other kind of pottery, and that would be this Egyptian pottery over here, which is not burnished, that is, doesn't have a finish to it, but is painted on. And this also goes back to about 4000 BC. It's a different style of pre-dynastic pottery. The Egyptians started these different kinds of pottery, and we use that to help date the different periods of their history. But we also use this to see how their culture in this area of Africa was growing and developing into forms of great beauty. One of the items found at Tlaylat Rasul or Gasul is this jar. The jar has inside of it the skeleton of an infant. Now there are a number of explanations for it, and we have to be careful not to jump to too many conclusions, because it certainly is possible that the child died of natural causes or starvation and was just buried in a jar. Could also be, from what we know of later times, that when somebody had a child that was deformed or had some other problem, they would put it in a jar to die. Or a third possibility that we also know from later times is that people would put a boy, usually baby boy, into a jar and bury it as a sacrifice in order to ward off spirits and the gods and to placate the gods. One of the great tragedies is that this burial of babies inside jars as something of a way to placate gods or spirits happened in Israel. Israelite houses are found with baby boys in these kind of jars underneath the threshold of their houses. And we think that they put them there to keep evil spirits away from the house. However, how can anybody kill a baby and think that they are going to protect themselves from evil, when what they are doing is itself an evil act? For this reason, God condemned this in the Torah, in the law, and the prophets of Israel condemned it as well. There are a couple things to think about with this kind of pottery. First of all, it had not been in use a whole long time. Pottery was invented late in the Neolithic period, somewhere in the 5000s BC. By 4500, it's still kind of new. So they imitate the previous technology. The previous technology had been baskets, and they still have rope as a symbol of what this is for. Something like a basket, but now holding grain in a more permanent way. We see over here, this piece has the same kind of motif, another rope around it. And some think that perhaps this was meant to symbolize a snake that was there to protect it from rats. As you know, snakes eat rats, rats eat the grain. So a snake to protect from the rats would be very useful. But it also might just be that, as humans always do, they take their most recent technology, in this case pottery, and make it look like the previous one. Well, this is a typical human endeavor. And what they did is they made the clay pot look like baskets.